Hello, we are finally out of those first 3 months of the year. I actually had a really good start to this year so far, but I always find January, February and March just very gloomy, meh-y months. Meh. So, we're now in April. It is officially April 1st today, so that means it is time for my March wrap-up. I read 10 books in March. I just seem to be on a bit of a reading roll at the moment. I removed the pressure of having a reading goal for this year, and I think I've probably read more at this point in the year than I had any other previous year for having a reading goal, so interesting. The reason I removed it is because I wanted to remove that pressure and take away the kind of competitive element with my previous self when it comes to how many books I read, and I think that has definitely worked, and it's changed the way that I'm enjoying the books that I'm reading, as well as a couple of other changes that I've made to the way that I approach it. So it's working. I've read 10 books. Let me tell you what they were. The first book that I finished, I feel like I've been talking about this one all over the place in different videos. This is The Daughters of Ishtar by Hadir Elspeh, and this is fantastic. This book is exactly what I wanted at the time of picking it up. I wanted a fun fantasy that still had big epic moments and a great magic system, and this had all of those things. This is an Egyptian-inspired world with sapphic romance, elemental magic, and amazing world building within the city that we see these characters in, and the potential to expand outside of that as well, which I'm very excited for. The way it ends has me very desperate for book 2, so I'm really hoping that this one stays as clearly in my brain in a year's time or whenever the sequel's coming out as it is right now. This follows two women. They don't know each other, their lives are very separate, but they both feel like they're having their paths chosen for them, and that isn't something they want. So they end up both joining a women's rights group, and their lives kind of become a little bit entwined through this. And this women's rights group goes from being something that is fairly peaceful, that is just trying to evoke this change and trying to show people how they can get this change, to something that is suddenly in the centre of this huge political uproar and a lot of violence and danger. This is very high stakes, it's very epic, there's a lot going on, and I absolutely loved it. I rated this one a 4.5 out of 5. Then I finished Wayward. This is by Amelia Hart, and this is another fantastic feminist yes kind of story, so there's a bit of a theme accidentally for a couple of these books this month. This I listened to as an audiobook and really enjoyed it. Follows 3 different characters in 3 different time periods, all somehow linked together, and all with a surrounding theme of witchcraft. I'm just looking at to refresh myself on the time zones we're in. So we've got 2019, 1942 and 1619, and we're following different characters within each of these periods that have very different things going on, yet not actually that different. And this is about how their lives intertwined together and how their stories all ended up, because obviously the difference being that the modern day character that we're following is able to learn about what's happened in the past, and we can see a different side to their stories and their narratives through her perspective, which was a great way of doing this story, because you've got the perspectives of the characters in the past as they're living their lives, but then we get to see what actually happened with their lives from our character in the present. So generally, I really liked this. I think it was a really interesting take. It wasn't massively fast-paced, but it still had quite a lot going on, and I felt very invested, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read this. This is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikri by Gabrielle Zevin. This blew me away. So I was doing a video reading books about books. I will pop it up here if you do want to check it out. And this was the first book that I started with, and oh my gosh, it set the bar very high. This follows a man who runs a bookshop after the death of his wife, and he is really unhappy. He's not really got much hope and joy going on in his life. And then he discovers a 2-year-old has been left in his shop with a note saying that she has been left for him. And his life gets flipped around quite quickly and quite intensely, and this is about their journey together and how they both change each other. This is such a fascinating read for so many reasons. Like it's an interesting look into how people can affect other people, and how it's the people around you that can really emphasize the joy and experiences that you have in your life, and I really loved that side of it. But also there was a great love of books in this, and of course that was why I was reading this book, but I absolutely loved that aspect of it as well. That felt like it was at the very core of this book. So for so many reasons I love this. The writing style Gabrielle Zevin uses is just, oh, it's beautiful. I gave this 5 out of 5. Next up, I read on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy, The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. Now I'd already DNF'd 2 books that I guess I should probably also tell you about. I don't include include DNFs in my wrap-up because I didn't finish the books. I DNF'd Girl Reading and The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend, and I was kind of feeling a little bit like, no, I really want to read some books for this video, and I don't know which ones I can find and which ones I'm actually going to stick with and enjoy. And then the Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan came along. This was a brilliant, fun contemporary romance following a woman who is made redundant or fired from her job as a librarian and decides to move up to Scotland and open up a mobile bookshop, running it out of a van. It's just such a lovely concept, and now I want to run a bookshop out of a van. I genuinely, after finishing this book and during reading it, was thinking how plausible it would be to actually do that, and my conclusion was it's probably not going to be something I jump into in the near future, but oh my gosh, how lovely would that be? Anyway, this book was really, really lovely. It felt like an ode to readers, and there was a couple of nods throughout that continued that theme. So I really enjoyed those aspects of it. I loved that we had this kind of new beginning, doing it for yourself and having the life that you really want and carving that out for yourself. I really loved that from our main character. And I just love that this was fun and easy. That's what I wanted. I wanted something that was just going to be a nice, escapist, easy read. And that is exactly what this one was. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I went for a non-fiction, which I don't do enough of and probably should do more. This is Diary of a Tuscan Bookshop, and this is by Alba Donatai, and this is translated by Elena Parla. This follows one woman who has quit her corporate life, very busy life, to come back to her hometown and open up a small bookshop. It's a very small town, and the idea of the bookshop was kind of doomed from its creation. That's literally how it's worded on the blurb. I'm not just being really mean. It says Alba's enterprise seemed doomed from day one, but it surprisingly sparked the enthusiasm of many across Tuscany and beyond. So basically there wasn't a massive amount of hope for this, but it happened anyway, and it ended up working. This is the story of that bookshop over the course of 6 months. These 6 months take place within COVID days, so there's a lot of mention of COVID, a lot of mention of lockdown, and I honestly did find that a little bit difficult. Like, I wasn't really feeling like I wanted to pick it up sometimes because I didn't want to go back into that world, I would say. It's still so fresh. I don't know if I'm ever going to want to read books with that in it, and I know that's probably going to be unavoidable with some contemporary that's going to have been written in the last few years, but I don't need that at the moment. And I mean, some people might be fine with it, but I just don't want to read about it. So this did have that, which I didn't really click going into it. I probably should have if I actually looked at the dates, because this is written as like diary entries. We basically get day accounts of what is happening at the time, but also those day accounts look back at the kind of origin of this bookshop and the idea behind creating this bookshop, and that I really enjoyed. I much preferred the chapters or the diary entries that looked back at the past rather than the ones that were talking about lockdowns and how that was affecting things. However, saying that, as much as I don't want to read about it, and obviously I didn't have to read this was my own choosing, I did find it interesting to see this first-hand perspective of what was happening during COVID. And obviously we all knew that a lot of small independent businesses and a lot of generally businesses were struggling and still are because of COVID. And it was interesting to read that first-hand account of what was going on. So this one definitely split me in two, because the writing and the format of it was fantastic. The diary entries, one thing I really enjoyed is, so just as an example here, at the bottom of one of the diary entries, you can see the orders taken that day at the bookshop. I loved that, and I really loved the fact that we could see the reflection of the bookseller's tastes in the types of books that were bought or repeat purchased. So I really loved all of that. I didn't love the COVID side of things. However, I accept it's a non-fiction. It was very real and it was grounded very much in that reality. So I did end up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Labyrinth of Spirits by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is the final book in the series of the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, the first one being The Shadow of the Wind. This whole series is a mystery series set in Barcelona primarily, initially following a young boy and his dad, and then kind of the young boy takes over the storyline mostly, and now in this book we're kind of seeing a merge of the first few characters, but also characters that we've picked up along the way that have kind of joined their little family unit. You could read these as separate books if you wanted to, but I don't think you would get the ties and the family bonds and the relationships that have been curated and built up throughout this series to get to this point, because that was really what hammered it in for me as being fantastic. I don't want to tell you what this book is about specifically, because I don't want to accidentally ruin any of the other books, but the first book follows a young boy who is taken to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books with his dad, which is a place where you can pick one book and you can take that book home with you, and that is your book. He picks a book that he ends up getting really fascinated with and wants to know more about this author, and in doing so uncovers a pretty dangerous hidden mystery that is linked to this author in this book. So that's the first book. And then this book, obviously events have changed since the first book. This book does still follow some of those characters, and new characters as well, who I absolutely loved reading about. The new character that we meet in this book, I loved her so much. She is such a powerhouse and really great to read about. She really had she was very morally grey in places, but also had very strong morals in other places, and I really enjoyed that about her. She's a character that has chronic pain as well, and seeing that reflected in this book and how that affects her every single day was really interesting to read about as well. Just generally, for so many reasons, I loved this. The way that it came to a conclusion, and it felt so full circle. The end had me feeling really emotional, and when I finished this, I think I just kind of sat there and had to process it for a minute. If you want my full reaction to finishing this book, I filmed a vlog clip for the Books About Books video, again, I'll pop it up there again, that has me finishing this book. No spoilers, but it just is as close to me having finished the book and giving my immediate reaction as I could do. So yeah, I really loved this. I'm probably not giving a very good indication as to what it's about or why I loved it so much, because I don't want to give any inadvertent spoilers, but all you need to know is it's an epically great series, and it feels, I think because this book is so chonky, it just felt like such a well drawn out conclusion. It's not a massively fast-paced series, I will say that, but having been reading this since I was at university, so for like 10 years, I'm so glad that I have been able to see what happens with these characters. I'm so sad to see the end of these characters' stories, because Carlos Ruiz Zafón has unfortunately passed away, so we're not getting anything more from this world and these characters. But it was a beautiful conclusion, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next up was a book that I wanted to challenge myself to read over 24 hours. I'm not going to tell you whether I achieved it or not, because you'll have to watch the vlog that I don't think is out yet, is it? I don't think it is. It's coming soon. It's either coming soon or it's out, but keep an eye out for it. Hit the little bell notification to be told when I do post anything like that. But the book that I was challenging myself to try and read in 24 hours was The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is for a Patreon readathon that I was doing. I try and do quite regular Patreon readathons, and we did a 24-hour one last weekend, and this was on my TBR. P.S. If you do ever want to join the Patreon readathons, they are available to all tiers, and there is a link down below. You can join for as little as £1 and get access to the readathons I try and do as often as possible. I try and do at least one a month. This is an epic Norse-inspired fantasy. It is part of a series. It's a trilogy, I think, and I am very excited to read the second one, which comes out in paperback very, very soon, so I'm going to be buying that as soon as it comes out. I've got an order already waiting for me at my local Waterstones. But this follows 3 different characters on their path for vengeance, and, well, mainly vengeance, actually, to be honest. A lot of it is about that, to be honest. The storylines that we're following is somebody whose son has been taken from her, and she is on a path to find him and get him back and basically take down anyone who stands in her way. She's really cool. I really liked her. The other 2 storylines we're following follow one woman who is a Jarl's daughter but doesn't want that title and rejects everything that comes with that in pursuit of fame through battle instead, and that journey with her and how she's kind of tried to step aside from what her dad could have carved for her. And the other character we're following is a thrall who has thrown off his chains and is trying to get some answers about something that happened to someone very close to him, and in doing so ends up joining up to this, or signing up to join this group of mercenaries. So it's about those 3 different storylines and the big wider issue that's going on that I won't go into details about because I don't want to accidentally give any spoilers. This is very epic, it's very bloody, very violent, so keep that in mind if you do want to pick this one up, but it was a great read and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I decided to break myself in 2 a little bit and read Wandering Souls by Cecil Pinn. This is a very emotional read. This follows a trio of siblings who have to leave Vietnam during the Vietnam War and come over to the UK, and the loss that they go through. This is about them as a family and they're having to re-establish their life in the UK and what that looks like for them and the struggles that they have trying to do that. This is an incredibly emotional book because of how personally written it feels. You're following these characters over years of their lives, and everything that has affected them to get to where they are now. It was really beautiful and very hard-hitting, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Garth Nix's The Sinister Booksellers of Bath. This is the sequel to The Left-Handed Booksellers of London, which I read a few years ago. In fact, like 3 years ago now, is it? Whatever it was, whenever it came out. That was fantastic. I loved that so much, and I was so excited for this sequel, and it did not disappoint. This is one of those books that played so well like a movie in my head, which I just think is fantastic. It's so visual. I love the characters, the humour, the individuality behind each of them. This is a sequel, so I won't tell you what this one was about, but the first one follows the left-handed and right-handed booksellers, who are split between basically booksellers that are like spies, action-adventure booksellers, and then the more knowledgeable research-based booksellers, and they are basically part of this world that is there to police the modern new world from the old world. And this is about one woman who gets, or the first book is about one woman who gets kind of drawn into that world and experiencing everything and learning that this world even exists. It's a fantastic, fantastic fantasy series, and I love the integration between the modern world and this old world. It's set in the 80s, which I love as well, because we get a lot of pop culture references, and it's just a great fun reading experience, and I love the fact this one was set in Bath. I think when I last spoke about this in a video, I said that I wasn't getting as much about the Bath setting as I wanted to. The further into this book I got, as expected, it did become more about that, so I really loved it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I ended the month on a bit of a flop, unfortunately. This is In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. This really let me down. Hang on, this is translated fiction. It's translated by Ralph McCarthy. So this is following a tour guide in Japan who is showing around this American guy who he's getting kind of weird vibes about. And he's showing him around at night, and then he ends up getting pulled into the dark, murderous web that this guy operates in. This was pinned to me as a dark thriller. Dark, definitely. Thriller, The pacing is so painfully slow at the start. The end does pick up, and I think that's possibly why I've given it like more of a 0.5 star than I was going to. But the whole plot of this just, it was so boring. I just didn't feel engaged with it. I didn't feel interested. I didn't care. And I just generally felt like I was willing it to end, and that is never a good thing. And the reason I kept reading this was for a video. If you would like to see that video, I'll pop a link up here. It was for Cover to Cover episode 2, and this was the book that I got recommended from Pigeon Books. I found it so boring. It was incredibly violent and grim, and I don't mind reading books that are like that, but this one for me I did not hit the mark. It really didn't. So unfortunately, my final read of the month was a 2.5 out of 5. I'm surprised it wasn't a 2, but I think, I don't know, it just scraped a little tiny weeny bit higher, but it was not good. Now I'm thinking about it, it should be more like a 2, but I didn't love it. So that was my 10 book March wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Comment down below how many books you read in March and what your favourite was. You can also subscribe to see more of my face on your feed and hit the little bell icon to be notified when I post. Link down below, you can find my Patreon and my online shop. Thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling and stay positive.